Today, Anna. Cool. We are so excited to be having AC talk with us today about working remotely, and we're excited you are here to join in on the conversation. What time is it now? 12:01. Oh, well, David Lawhorn, you can join us. We'll allow it. Welcome, David. If you can hear me, appreciate you coming by. Excited to have you guys here. You are more than welcome to also ask questions via the chat. AC and I are actually going to do this in more of an interview style today because we thought it'd be a little more interesting, and we wanted to make sure we got your questions answered and really tailored the presentation to things that you guys might want to know about. So we'll start off with some questions that we already have formulated. We are sure you're going to want to know. And then from there, we will be able to have questions as we go. Now, Anakul will be with us today as well. He's our tech master, and he will be helping us monitor the chat in addition to letting everybody in and making sure we are all good to go. So if you do have any questions and you think of it, yes, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we will get to them as we go along. I don't want you to forget your questions. Don't feel like you have to wait till the end. That's why we have Anakul here to help us out.
I got you covered.
I see a question in the chat already. Amanda, I noticed you're using a microphone. Does that make, yes, it does make a significant difference. We're still waiting. We're going to probably begin the conversation closer to 12:05, just to let a few more people show up. So while we are doing that, Jeremy, I will give you a little preview of what the internal microphone sounds like versus my USB microphone here. So this is what I call a producer USB. That's the name of it. And this is what the internal microphone sounds like. So you probably will hear a difference between the two. I have no idea because I can't hear myself.
There is a distinct difference. I really hear it.
It makes a big difference there. I also have, well, one AirPod Pro because the other one was being a jerk.
And now you're muted. You must be waiting for your microphone to pick up.
It should be back to the producer now.
There it is.
Awesome. Yes. I would love to share the link with you, but this microphone is not sold anymore. I need to buy one that I could share with everybody. Kind of a flaw to my system here. But I'm like, why spend the money? It's like a 12-year-old microphone and it's still working great. So I'll share with you guys a couple of different ones that I know of. But yes, if you don't know me, I'm Amanda May Gray. I help people do this, talk on camera, and I host events and interview as well. I also have a podcast and a YouTube channel. So if you have any questions about that and the setup, I could be happy to help you as well. But yes, the number one thing with any of these video calls is your audio. Audio is most important because if we can't hear you, that's the whole point, didn't we? So I think we can go ahead and, well, okay, it's 12:04. Oh, that was a really slow minute in my world. I felt like I was just talking for 5 minutes. But I want to thank you all for coming again. We're currently at 12 participants, and I think that is fabulous. This is being recorded as well, so just want to let you know that in advance. In case you're not big on the recording thing, don't feel pressure to come on off of your camera, but of course we'd love to see you and your shining faces while we are talking today. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat for AC. We will get to those while we go along. We're hoping to keep this as a relaxed conversation because working remote is fun and it shouldn't be super stiff. And we want to show that to you guys as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop our party music, stop sharing, come back to the full screen. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining. And today we get to talk to AC Chan. AC is part of District 44 Toastmasters group, but he hasn't been in Atlanta, which is where we are based, all that much in the last 4 years. He actually has been traveling around with his family, which includes his wife and 2 children, in an Airstream travel trailer, camper trailer. I'm trying to think of the different words that you could use to describe what it is, but I'm sure we'll get a photo of it as well. And he has been working remotely that whole time, which is like so cool. I'm super excited to learn more about this. And I know you guys all want to as well, because that's why you're here. So again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But keep in mind, even if you are not working in a trailer, running around the country, that this information is very applicable as well now that many of us are working remote. So without further ado, I would like to bring up AC so that we can have a lovely conversation. And if you missed, I did mention before, we are going to be doing this as more of an interview style rather than, just a one-on-one presentation, because we want to have a conversation about it. So AC, thank you so much for coming and joining us all the way from where exactly are you today?
Well, today, and actually for the last few weeks, I've actually been parked here at South Padre Island in Texas. For those of you who might be wanting to pull up a map, it's actually the southeasternmost corner of Texas that you can get to before actually getting to Mexico. So I can literally step outside and drive about 15 minutes and get to the Mexican border, which is pretty interesting. And I guess the other cool thing about why we came here is if I get onto the beach here, which is about maybe a few minutes walk, and I look south, I can see the SpaceX launch pad, which we are hoping that something is going to be going off this week. There's rumors of Tuesday or Wednesday, the SN-15 rocket going up, the Star Cruiser. So I'm a little bit of a space nerd there, but one of the big reasons why we decided to come down to South Padre Island.
And that's with Elon Musk, correct? That's not the government with that one, right?
Yes, Elon Musk, the guy who does SpaceX, who also created Tesla, the electric car, launching Starlink, the low orbit internet service. So quite an interesting fella.
That's awesome. That's so cool. You have been traveling for 4 years. How long do you typically stay in a place, and what are some of your other notable places you've stayed recently?
Yeah, so I guess just to give a little bit of a backdrop to help some folks, traveling. So I used to live in Atlanta, Georgia, actually for 10 years, and we were right up there in Lawrenceville, Georgia. And shout out to North Gwinnett Advanced Toastmasters and True North, who are both my clubs, and was so happy that everything went virtual because it allowed me to come back into the fold to participate in some of the meetings virtually, which is great. But after 10 years, we decided that we just wanted a new adventure. And pre-kids, we used to do a lot more interesting travels, I would say. It wasn't just Disney World, it was actually going to places like Europe, and we could stay up past 9 p.m. and those sort of things. And so after a while, we just felt like things kind of got a little bit of a rut, and we really missed the travel bit of it. So from inspiration from one of our other friends in our homeschool group, we decided to sell everything. We downsized out of the house into a 34-foot Airstream, and we've been traveling the country ever since. And I at your advice, Amanda, I'm gonna share a picture real quick because sometimes it's easier to see.
I love pictures. Oh,
So my youngest daughter, Suzette, when we first got the trailer, she nicknamed it Shiny Tiny, and it kind of stuck because it was shiny and it was tiny. So uh, that's the handle that we kept for our traveling adventures. We call it Shiny Tiny Times. My girls now are 13 and 6. So at that time they were probably 9 and 2 respectively when we launched. So
wow.
it's been an interesting adventure, but 34-foot Airstream, triple axle, and we've been to about 26, 27 states in the US, 2 Canadian provinces. Yeah, so that's been the adventure so far.
That's super cool. And what do you girls think of this whole traveling around? Do they enjoy it?
They love it. They really do. We probably one of the most common questions that I get is there an end in sight? And we don't know, quite honestly. Every year, usually around between Thanksgiving and Christmas, we have a family meeting and we decide what we want to do. Do we want to keep going? Do we want to pause? Do we want to go somewhere and stay there for a longer period of time? But of course, the bigger question is, do we want to keep going? And they've always voted yes. That's been a unanimous vote every single year so far. So there hasn't been a desire to want to settle down quite yet. Although we've been poking around different areas of the country looking for a small place, maybe some land for having a home base. But we look for experiences, and instead of trying to treat it like a vacation, we try to plan 2 to 3 big experiences that we really want to do over the course of the year, and try to maneuver our way logistically, to make those things happen. So it's a little bit different mentality in terms of logistics and planning to do things. Instead of moving, every 4 to 5 days when we first started, we tend to stay a month, maybe 2 months at a time now in certain places.
That makes sense. And I love that you have the girls involved in the decision-making process. I think that's a big takeaway, especially if you have children and you're even working remote from home, is getting the kids involved so that they're on board, so they're part of the conversation, so they feel like they have some ownership as well. I think that's awesome. Makes a
Absolutely.
big difference, I'm sure.
Family adventure, family plan. So, and even the
So,
best laid plans sometimes.
well, I'm sure they have some great ideas from here to there. So, how long have you been working remote total? You said you've been doing this on the road for 4 years, but how long have you been doing the remote thing? Were you doing it before you guys decided to sell the house and pack up and go on the road, or was that something new once you got on the road?
I've been fairly fortunate in that I've actually been working remote for almost 15 years now. So it's a pretty long time considering. I first started out working for a company for a good stint of time, about 8 years roughly. And even though we had offices in different locations, I usually didn't have to go into it because the responsibility I had was more on a virtual level, and I worked with clients in a certain region in an area. And then I transitioned over and I worked for a software startup for about a year, and still being in Atlanta, but the company was based in LA. So there was quite a bit of back and forth, during the time I worked for that company. And then after that, I stayed right here in Atlanta and started up my own company for about 4 years. That was pretty virtual as well, too, because I just figured out my own hours. And with Atlanta traffic, it's usually like out on the road between 10 to maybe 3, trying to avoid the crazy Atlanta traffic.
Totally.
And then most recently, I guess the last 2 years, I took a job with a company based out of Canada, back in an industry that I was familiar with. Traveled for the first year and then went virtual the second year, and have been virtual since now. So I'd say been pretty lucky. And I think this conversation is interesting because a lot of folks were thrown into working remote last year, not just themselves, but probably with their families too, and everyone just trying to figure out with the school, no school, everybody home. And by all accounts, I think it was really intense. I think we
Mhm.
coped, but I'm not really sure we did really well with thriving. And for the longer haul, I think folks have set up some things or figured some things out that probably works for them, but I haven't given it much thought just because I've been doing it for so long that I just have my routine, and probably some nuggets here and there that I hope will be helpful to our audience here in terms of helping them be not just happy and sane, I suppose, but also maybe find ways to be a bit more productive and thriving, in this scenario, because it'll probably be like this for a while longer, I think.
I agree. I think it could take some time. And I think a lot of people are transitioning to more of a permanent or even a hybrid, some days in the office and some days at home. So I don't see it going very far. You mentioned that you guys were homeschooling your children before. So that was something that you guys already had in the works.
Yes, we did. Well, while we were living in Lawrenceville, which is in Gwinnett County, when we moved back to Atlanta, Georgia, we moved across the country. So we were in San Jose, California at the
Oh,
time.
wow.
And when my wife had gotten pregnant, it wasn't a request like I'd like to move back to, near family. Is we're going to move back near family, make it happen. So we were in that situation. And when we came back, I still was traveling about 30% from my job. So if we were in Florida where all of our family were, it would just mean that I'd always have to do a hop through Atlanta anyways, because Atlanta is just a major hub, which would have ultimately added travel time to and from, doing things. So we decided to settle back in Atlanta, actually our second round, because we lived just ourselves in the late 90s was our first round.
Wow.
Um, But when we came back, we were looking around, and actually my brother stayed in Atlanta for quite a long time and was living in the Duluth area. So, and coincidentally, he was pregnant with his first child as well, about 4 months ahead of us. So some people ask if that was planned. I say, no, it wasn't. It just kind of, you get what you get. It happens when it happens.
True,
But
true.
that kind of influenced us, and we thought, oh, wouldn't it be so great, for the kids to be able to grow up together? They were cousins, only a couple months apart. That'd be fun. So he was in Duluth. We looked in the Lawrenceville area because it was a city we had looked at the first time we were here. Had completely changed apparently, because it used to be 2 lanes, one lane up, one lane back, but we just thought it was so great to be able to have that opportunity for sure. But after all those changes, we just decided it was time to find a new adventure for ourselves.
Love it. You have a work remote job. How do you get one of those, right? I think, since we're thrust into it, but now some people anyways, are enjoying it, and maybe they might have to go back in person. What do you look for, right? Like, is there a certain criteria you think of? Or just in general, how do you find jobs that allow you that flexibility to do it from kind of wherever?
I think there are a couple things, because I was just having this conversation with another person in our full-time community. They're like, "Oh, you're working remote. Like, how do you do that?" And I've been fortunate in jobs that I found to be able to work remote, but they were looking for advice. And the first thing I think, which is great, is that I think the stage has already been set for anybody to have the opportunity to work remote. Because last year everybody just went virtual, like it's like March and then April, then boom, like all of a sudden within weeks everyone had to be working remote. And previous to that, I've been in technology for 20 plus years. There was always sort of this, I think, misperception that we can't all work remote, that it's not possible, right? And also I think there's some of that old culture in organizations that think that, well, if your butt's not in your office seat, you must not be working. If I can't see you, you're not working, right?
Right.
Which last year, considering how everything went and how everything just kept running, everything kept functioning, it totally dispelled that notion and that myth, not only around the feasibility of being able to do it, but around the productivity question as well. In fact, a lot of the things that I've read talk about how a lot of organizations and people have actually been more productive because they're being able to focus in on their work. You don't have that extra commute time. There's a balance to the other side of that, but it's made the impossible possible now, which is great. And I would say that my observation has been that in your current role, there's a couple of different grades, I would say. So if your role was required to be in person a lot of the time, that working remote might be tough. So let's say, for example, a bank teller. It's hard to be
Right.
remote as a bank teller. But if you're doing, operations or some kind of support role or client services, where you're on the phone, a lot of positions I think are able to be virtual with a conversation, I think, from your manager. I think it starts with just having that conversation and say, you know what, I'd like to be full-time remote. I'd like to be maybe part-time remote. How can we make that happen? Because there used to be sort of a fringe benefit to say,
Right.
like, a company would have a work from home or remote working policy. But there's the pluses now outweigh the, I would say, perceived drawbacks, that if you have any interest whatsoever right now, I would say have a conversation. And you may not get a yes right off the bat. There might be, oh, let me think about it, or let's talk about that more. But at least you can open the door to saying, what the possibilities are. One of my favorite, I can't remember now who said it, but one of my favorite quotes is, if you never ask the question, the answer is no.
Yeah.
So if you approach your boss with this kind of interest, the question about working remote, if they don't turn you down outright, then that means there's a possibility that you could do something like this if you want to. And more jobs are becoming more virtual. I talk to I work for an IT research company now. I talk to organizations all the time that are restructuring their recruitment practices, because now they realize that there's a bigger talent pool out there that they can tap into. It's not just about hiring somebody and they have to come and move into the city. If they find the right talent and they feel comfortable in the candidate, then it could be totally remote position no matter where it is. I just talked with a organization I worked with the other day that's based in Washington and hired somebody out of Florida. So totally possible.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point. You know, companies spend a lot or used to spend a lot of money on relocation
Yep.
for people. And that's not necessary. You would spend a lot less money just bringing somebody to the corporate office for a week, you know, once a year, whatever, at the beginning, just to get along or, you know, get to know one another, than it is to relocate people and uproot them. So that brings
Mhm.
up a point as well as, you know, ask your current boss and talk to them. And you never know what might happen if you have that conversation. But it is a good point. Make sure you have that conversation sooner than later if you're thinking about it as well. I love that point.
Yeah,
So
I
you're a
think
remote
now,
worker.
yeah, I think now it'll be more around their comfort level with you. The usual objections don't really hold water anymore. So, nurturing that relationship, and developing the confidence, in your ability to be able to work remote just as well as when you were in the office. We're doing it anyway. So, like I said, I think it's just a great pivot point that you could ask the question and gain that benefit for yourself.
Absolutely. I love it. You're remote, you got to stay in the loop. Obviously, you can email. Now you're probably doing more video calls than you did before, but how do you stay connected as a remote worker? You're all over the place, but also how can that apply to somebody who, you know, maybe the office isn't that far away, but now they're working remote? How do we stay connected? What are some good tips that you've come up with or strategies?
I think you have to make a deliberate effort around it, similar to maintaining friendships. It takes an effort. If you don't pay attention to it or nurture it, then it's really not going to develop and be strong. And I think that, well, humans, I mean, we're just social creatures, right? I mean, even doing our Toastmasters meeting, it doesn't have the same dynamic doing it virtually than when we were there in person. We've probably all been in a similar situation where, how easy is it to have, I mean, we're just having a conversation here, and so at least we can go back and forth. You add a third person into the mix. I mean, how well can you have a conversation? You multiply that out to, the normal size of a Toastmasters meeting. It's not easy to have a conversation. Just the dynamics of doing it virtually are clunky, I guess is the best way to describe it.
Good
So
word.
two people start talking at the same time, like, oh, I'm sorry, no, you go, no, you go, no,
Right.
it's that's kind of situation. Um, so I personally, try to keep in touch with folks and reach out to folks to chat or to have conversations on a regular basis. Maybe it's work related, maybe, there's definitely some friendships that I've garnered. Well, I'll talk with them just on, hey, let's just kind of catch up, and I'll throw 30 minutes on the calendar, and let's talk. In our company, at least in our team, what we had decided to do is every week we have a standing meeting, on Wednesday at 12 o'clock noon, right at lunchtime, that we just have a social gathering. And the only rule about it is no talk about work. So it's a chance just
Mm,
talk about whatever, like the virtual water cooler, I suppose. But we talk about what's going on, stuff in the news, stuff we're interested in, what we're planning, what we're doing. But it's just to hang out essentially, and do something other than work and stay in touch with each other. So that's another great way to do something if everyone will commit to participating.
yeah, I love that idea. That's great. That commitment to not talking about work, but then still feeling like you're kind of getting that interaction that you would normally get if you were in person. You would normally, you know, ask how somebody's day is going or see that they're upset about something and be like, hey, what's going on? So I think that's really cool that you have that going on with everybody in the office as well. So you used to work remote in person, so to speak, or I guess in a single location, a single physical. Man, I can't even say that because technically you're still working from the same location in your trailer. It's just it's moving around. What do
Yeah.
you think is different, you know, working in a house in a home office versus in a mobile office on the road, but with the same space, like with your consistency there? What do you think is different between those two dichotomies?
One of the things that I probably had to, well, there's a few things I had to figure out early on. One of them, of course, is connectivity, right? Like being connected to the internet.
Totally.
Most places so the question that people ask typically is, well, what do you use for internet? So my setup currently now is I have a Verizon hotspot for internet off cellular service. My backup is I have a Sprint hotspot as well that sits off the T-Mobile network because those three had merged together. And then my phone primarily is on T-Mobile as well. So between primary and backup, and sometimes if I'm in a location, they might have Wi-Fi, but usually it's kind of crap, quite frankly. Like the campground we're in, everyone's, they were saying, oh, we offer, Wi-Fi services, but when you get on there, it's horrible. It's really pretty bad. I'm not paying any money for this. But the one thing we did luck out in this spot is that there's an internet provider called Spectrum, kind of similar to Comcast, and they do a month-to-month no contract thing. So I went down to the office, signed up, and they gave me a cable modem on lease, and I just have to bring it back. Otherwise, I'll charge my credit card. And it's kind of average. I mean, it was like 40. I think it was like $40 for the month, which I was ecstatic about, right? Because I still carry my router, so I just hooked it up and I was good to go. And we've actually had pretty decent internet for the most part. Although when the kids hop on, they suck down all the bandwidth because they're doing their Netflix or whatever they're doing, So, yeah, exactly. But internet is definitely a top concern, so that's how I usually mitigate around that. I used to also have an AT&T hotspot as well too, but the coverage between them and Verizon is usually pretty similar. So I didn't feel the need to pay for two providers at the time. So I ended up dropping AT&T because it was the more expensive of the two at that time. And other than that, sometimes I just kind of, when I get to a location, I'll scope it out. I'll take my phone literally, and I'll take my hotspots with me in the truck, and I'll drive around and I'll clock and I'll see like how's download speed here, because sometimes it's okay, or sometimes I may have to go somewhere else to be able to do certain calls. Most of the time, I'm usually dialing in and doing calls, like phone conferences for the most part, because when you're doing video and phone at the same time via internet, sometimes you get a little bit of a hiccup, a little bit of a lag. So a lot of times I'll just dial in because it'll work. And folks are so used to it anyways that if I'm not on video, they're not offended. And usually most people know my situation. So the question they usually open up with is, oh, where you at today, AC?
Where are you?
And so they just kind of understand that, I always tell them a lot of the time you can hear me or you can see me, but you don't get both. So, so usually hearing is the more important of the two. But yeah, checking around for internet has probably been the most important part from a physical standpoint. I would say also was trying to figure out my office space. Previously in old house, I had, one of the bedrooms turned into my office, which was great. And here, I should probably share. Hold on a second. This would be fun.
Oh, I'm in. I can't be the only person that is like super curious about how you actually are effectively using your space, because I think that's been a big challenge this year is like, okay, yeah, we all have homes, but like we didn't have office space for everybody all at once. So I'm super curious.
Okay, so ta-da, here's my office. So in the back here, in the bedroom previously when we moved in, we actually had two twin beds, one on each side. And it really wasn't going to fly that I slept on one side and my wife slept on the other side. So we had to remediate that. So we actually converted the back into a queen bed, which instead of going lengthwise, the queen bed turned sideways. And so from that, we gained a little bit of, space here in the sides. So I went and got some plywood and did my home improvement skill project and basically made myself a desk. This is actually my second iteration because the first one was very, very wobbly, was not stable. So I redid it after about a year because it wasn't doing it. But the important features here I'll point out is I have this for my laptop. When it's sitting down here, you kind of see my bolster seat here that I will sit down to give myself a little bit of a boost, but it also swings around this way and it'll telescope up so I can actually stand and work on the side here as well with my laptop. The telescoping arm here is great because as you can see, I can connect all sorts of stuff like lights and so forth for calls and that sort of thing. My mini whiteboard over here. If I come over here, you kind of see this, I think, was something I stole from IKEA. It was for silverware. It was a wood drawer, but I was like, hey, this would be great as an accessory on the top of my desk. So as you can see, I have all sorts of things here. I have, other backup hotspots, my, wallet, other, cables, passport just in case, because you never know if you got to run out of here. Have a nice little thing here that I got from IKEA for all the pens and stuff. I do have a little bit of wall space here, where I hang pictures and Father's Day cards for the kids, Yoda Man. And then if I go back a little bit further, I actually purposely made this into a 2-tier desk, and organization is the whole thing, right? So I have boxes for everything. And one side down here, more files and organization. So like this level is all mine. This bit is all mine. And then what happened here, we see it closed out, is actually a side shelf I built for access, so that my wife can use it for all the homeschool books, for the kids' curriculum. So every space used, nothing, no free space for sure. So I try to eke out every little bit that I could. But that's the setup. Nothing fancy. It's quite functional and compact. I try to keep it organized as best as I can, and but that's my workspace. That's my quote unquote my office, I guess. Other than that, my other virtual setup would be the truck. So sometimes, as I mentioned, when the internet may not be so good, I just grab my backpack, I'll throw my laptop in, charger, hotspots. I have a converter, so I can plug in my laptop so I can charge it, from the lighter, the cigarette lighter, and I just go where I need to go. Sometimes I cheat. If I can't find good internet, I'll go to a Panera and stake out in a Panera.
Who was
or
wondering?
Starbucks.
You must have a
Starbucks.
frequent flyer program for those places.
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten quite a bit of Starbucks stars, as well as Panera visit points, but they're great. I can find a little corner in there and usually set up, and most of those places are typically in a decent cellular service area as well too.
Right.
So
that makes sense.
I'm not hopping off their internet, then I can use my own. So yeah, have options.
That's awesome. I think what's really important to take away from that is the organization is huge, and using every little bit of space. You have like the little drawer and then the little thing for pens. And I think that's something we tend to like spread out or want this clean look, or like get overwhelmed in all of it in our own homes to think we need a huge, huge space to work when we probably don't. We probably don't need as much. So that's great to see. I appreciate you showing us.
I go through a constant purging. I mean, every week I always have to purge stuff. It's like receipts, for example, right? If I don't have to take a receipt, like I go to the ATM, I just don't take a receipt because I know it's just going to end up on my desk, which means it's going to get cluttered and I have to throw it away, because what am I going to do with the receipt anyways? Unless I'm buying like clothes I might have to return, but groceries, I leave the store, I throw the receipt away, because most of them can look it up by the credit card you purchased on anyway. So
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Why have it? So there's not a compelling reason really to have all this paper anymore. And adjusting some habits a little bit here and there has allowed me to bring home less clutter. On the space thing, you bring it up, we do have a very strict rule about, we have finite space. It's non-negotiable, right? And so our general rule is if you bring something in, something has to go out.
Ooh.
So like, got a new polo shirt a couple of weeks ago, had to throw away an old one, and that's just how it works. We don't have extra closets sitting around here, or I can throw it into another bedroom. This is it. 34 foot in length, 8 feet apart in width. So we're talking about 320 square feet. That's it.
Wow, that's amazing. I think that's a good rule to have in a home or in a trailer. If you bring something in, something must go. And I think I'm going to attempt to make that something in my house, but we'll see how it goes. We got 3 kids too, and they're not used to that. So it might be a process. But did you find that it was a process for you guys? Did you guys have a big adjustment from the normal life to this life? Or has it been relatively easy to move into that and stick with some guidelines that everybody understands?
I think fortunately since we've been homeschooling since my oldest one, Camille, since she was little. And so as far as the homeschooling part of it took a little bit to get used to. So at home, what we had negotiated was, if I'm in the office, you can come visit me. But if the door was closed, it meant that I was doing something important or I was on a call. So, you really couldn't come in. And for the most part, I'd say she was pretty good about that, about honoring that agreement that we had. And when we went on the road, although I don't have a strict door that separates the front from the back, we do have a sliding curtain, that functions in the same manner. So it's similar understanding and agreement that, if the curtain's closed, then I'm probably on a call or I'm working and, need some space, so please don't disturb me. Because there's only so much space that we have here. I mean, past the curtain, just on the other side of this wall here is the bathroom, right? So I can't say, oh,
Right.
no, you can't go to the bathroom, so,
You could
there's,
try, but
I know it
might
wouldn't
not
work.
work out well.
No, it wouldn't. Um, but I think it is just having a conversation agreement with your family, if you haven't already, just trying to figure out about, what space is and what things can we put into place, so that we can have that privacy when we need it, for calls or for, think time to do our work, to be productive, is having an agreement. And it's not perfect. I mean, some days, they have little, meltdowns in the front and I can hear it echoing back here. I'll try to turn on the fan or the AC to try and have some white noise to blot that out. But a lot of the time they're usually outside, playing, doing activity, or doing some activities in the front, whatever the case may be. But, most of the time it's usually okay. But, things are just going to happen. It's just like some of the funny videos that you see online with, people with their dogs barking or whatever the case may be. It's just, we're all here together and it'll,
Me all the
you
time.
know, I think everyone can empathize and appreciate that it's not that easy to have it so clear cut and dry to say my space, your space, or just don't totally disturb me. Because I mean, my youngest one, she comes back here probably 50% of the time, even though I have the curtain drawn, but it's usually because she just wants to peek her head back here and, she's kind of like, hi, daddy, or doing, one of those things. Or she knows I'm on a video call. And
Well,
yeah, I mean, she's quite a jokester,
well, all the world's a stage, and she got a stage for daddy.
Yeah, I know.
Do the kids have their own dedicated space? And how important do you think it is to have some sort of like a routine or a standard, or like, okay, this is where daddy works, this is where, the kids work, or is that a little bit more loose for them because you guys are moving around so much?
I think the personal space delineation is important, not only because we're here in this trailer, but I mean, even at home too, right? Everyone has their own personal space and honoring that. So both the girls, in the front, what we had built out is they have bunk beds, so my older one's on top, the younger one's on bottom. They each have their space. And I just don't go in there. I don't go searching around in their space like I wouldn't go necessarily like trudging around in their room, when they have their own little curtains, which are kind of at their door. So if the curtain is closed, I'll knock on the outside and wait for them to, pop it open, before I talk, and I just won't jump in, so trying to honor each other's space, I think is important, to be respectful of that, because it gives them a sense of privacy and it gives them a sense of their own space. As far as routines are concerned, I'd say it varies pretty much almost on a day-by-day basis. When it comes to homeschooling, I think it varies depending on your philosophy. A lot of people approach it in different ways, and there's no right or wrong to how you do it. Whether you're currently tied into the school system or part of the time, or you're doing your own thing. When it comes to homeschooling, there's such a wide variety of choice, everything from, highly structured to unstructured on the other side, which they would kind of call unschooling, if you ever want to look that up. And then you have everything
Okay.
from secular to non-secular, curriculum based versus non-curriculum based. So I think you just have to find, what works for you and your family culture. Because I know at the beginning we tried to be really structured, because my wife and I, we went through traditional public school. So it was
Sure.
kind of like, that class and you change and class and you change and so forth. We try to do that with the kids. Oh my God, it was horrible. Like it did not fly. And the other thing too was really just trying to figure out is like, trying to let go, I think, of some of the baggage we had in terms of what we think they should learn and what they should know. It's it was difficult, because, we kind of went through this program, and when we look back at it, it's like, well, how much of it did I really need? And
Right.
what we've observed is that their learning tends to be more of a function of interest and curiosity, which I think we know on a personal level, when we're curious or interested about something, we tend to learn a lot faster. So it's a lot less about making them learn something and really trying to feed into the interests that already exist. So for us, it makes sense because that's the path of least resistance. The flip side of that coin on the challenge for us is to observe where those interests are and always trying to feed the interest, because it ebbs and it flows. They'll be on a tear on something and can't get enough of it for like, a month. And then all of a sudden, like, they don't care about it anymore. We're like, what happened? You love this thing, but they just kind of changed and went over to something else. And that's okay. That's human nature, period. You may have a longer period of focus. You may have multiple things you may focus on. And I think learning and understanding what's going to work for you and be able to keep yourself sane at the same time is helpful. I can appreciate, why parents would need the structure a little bit more, because I think a lot of us need predictability in order to be able to do our work, to be able to plan our day. And so somewhere in between there, I think is a lot of opportunity to figure out what works for your family, what works for your family culture, for your work culture, how you can all be happy together, and move past frustration and more to understanding and being able to live comfortably together. Because as we've said earlier on, this is probably not going away anytime soon, and schools are open and schools get shut down, and schools get open, schools get shut down. So it's a seesaw thing. So I think you have to come up with a good game plan, a plan A and a plan B to figure out, hey, how are we going to approach this? What are we going to do?
Totally. I love that. And I love really what you said with like, there's no right or wrong. I think we get stuck in this idea that this is what you need to do, and then this is what you need to do, and then this is what you need to do. And instead being a little bit more lenient and making it work for you. And if it's not working, then make those adjustments, have those conversations, and figure something out. But since we're talking about scheduling, I want to know how you manage your own calendar with work, your own Monday through Friday. Do you take breaks? Do you have specific start and stop times when you're like, okay, daddy starts working at 9 a.m. and until 5 p.m.? Do you have a hard stop there? And what about like meetings and whatnot? So your calendar and how you function with all this as a whole, because I think that's really important for everybody that's working with their family coming and going all the time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, to start off, I think you have to delineate the boundaries on what your calendar looks like, and you have to honor, I
Mm.
think, when you start and when you actually stop. Just like you were driving to the office. I mean, you're going to go in there, you plan to walk into the door by X amount of time, and then you also plan to exit the office space to be home by a certain amount of time. So whatever that schedule is for you, I would say honor it, because it's so easy. I would say particularly on the back end of it, about when you want to stop. It's easy just to
Right.
hop online and say, oh, I'm just going to do one more email, and then next thing you know, you've been on for another hour, and it just kind of disappeared. So I think some personal rigor around when exactly am I starting, when exactly am I stopping, and being very good about honoring that. Now I understand that sometimes there's going to be some variances, like maybe you got to take your kids somewhere for a sporting activity, because your school's doing that sort of thing now, so maybe you have to start your day earlier. So I think that kind of invokes in the opportunity to say, hey, I have flexibility in my work schedule, but I still need to be very clear and defined about when I'm starting, when I'm stopping, because I don't believe you ever truly get ahead. It's like saying trying to get to the bottom of your inbox and keep it empty. It never happens. The work's
It
always
doesn't
going to
happen.
be there. So, when you stop, you stop. It'll be there tomorrow. Don't worry about it. It's not going anywhere.
Do you have notifications on your phone still with that stuff? Do you like leave them on, or do you ever turn that type of stuff off? Do you think
I
that's
don't have I don't have any, I would say, audible notifications on my phone, so nothing pops up to catch my attention. It's I think we've been trained by our phones, so
oh,
I
totally.
the only important notifications I have pop up are like certain text messages, from certain people, or if there's a phone call, or something like that. But otherwise, I've turned off pretty much all notifications, because otherwise, I mean, just all the time could be picking up your phone, because so for me, I'm pretty minimal when it comes to notifications. If an email comes in, I can see that maybe an email is there, but I don't have something pop up, on screen or notification otherwise, for something like that. Only for work related things, during, regular business hours, and that's it. And there's just some control settings you can fine tune around that. But generally for me, at least right now, I'm usually on by, I'd say, 9 until about 6, with an hour break in between for lunch for the most part. Sometimes my day starts a little bit earlier, so I'll adjust my schedule that way depending on. So since we're in Texas, I'm actually in Central Time, so I'm an hour behind you guys.
Oh, wow.
And whereas the rest of my company is actually, they're based in Canada, and they're all in Eastern Time. So coming back this way has changed it a little bit. So I've purposely hopped on a little bit earlier in the day to try and accommodate their schedule, the
Sure.
East Coast schedule. And but when I get off, I get off. Now in terms of breaks, I'd say that's important, is make sure that you actually schedule some breaks in there, like for
Mm.
example, like lunch. Like, walk away from your computer, don't sit and eat and do emails, step away, get some fresh air, or whatever you want to do. Go read a book and eat, or if your family's home, go have lunch with them. I would say that for us, having been on the road, it's pretty much an important point for us in terms of connection, that we usually have all of our meals together typically. So, even if I've been kind of doing this intermittent fasting thing lately,
Mhm.
so I may not have breakfast, but I'll at least sit down and have water. Maybe I'll cheat and I'll have some tea, but we'll still be there together in the morning, to have breakfast together, and then we'll break for lunch. I'll go and have lunch with them, and of course, end of my day is done, and then it's family time. Then we have dinner. In between there, I think there's some great opportunities to mix it up too. So for example, I think there's there's a lot of I don't know, it depends on us, but there are those meetings we probably have on our calendars where we don't actually participate in. We just dial in because we're all there for the meeting together. So I have, about 2 or 3 of those on the calendar where I just have to dial in. So when I have those kind of meetings and I'm just only have to listen for the most part, I'll leave. I'll go for a walk.
Mm,
For 30 minutes, a 30-minute stroll is pretty good. It's a pretty good stroll you can do around here. You might get in about a
like
couple of
that.
miles, but wherever you may be, just getting out, getting some fresh air, getting some movement is great because we were already sitting all the time for the most part in offices, and now we're
Right.
just doing it home. It's just a different location, but the same behavior. But I think the difference is here is whereas before in the office you would be in meeting rooms, now everything's virtual. So because you're at home, you can I'll just dial into my phone and put myself on mute, and I'll go outside and just walk around, for the duration of the call. So at least I can get a little bit of fresh air and get a little bit of exercise. It's not a ton, but it's something, and I think it's good for us to be able to have that kind of movement and external environment stimulation than just staying one spot for 8 hours a day.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that because I tend to pace when I'm on the phone anyways, and I don't really sit down and have a conversation. I'm like just walking around. So why not take those calls and just go for a walk? Put in some earbuds, and I love that. That's brilliant. Brilliant, Stacey. It's brilliant.
On the other thing too, you kind of mentioned meetings, and I would say
Yeah.
that I recently went back to, I guess, a previous habit because I do so many calls that I got to a point where I was doing so many calls that I I wasn't having time to do work. So because I'm services facing, I talk with clients all the time. I have so many clients that I connect with on a rotational basis that I don't always remember exactly what's the last thing we talked about. So on my calendar, I'll wedge in there some time to do some preparation. So like, okay, let me
Mm,
go back and look at my previous notes. What did we talk about? Anything else I need to be aware of? In order to prepare for this dialogue, for this call, to make sure that I'm doing a good job with facilitating the discussion or getting the things that I need. And then I'll schedule time on the back end of it too to do whatever follow-ups I need to do. So maybe it's updating our systems, maybe it's sending information. But if you could imagine in a day, if I'm just doing half an hour calls by itself with with the setup time in the front and the setup time behind it, I can easily do anywhere from 6 to 8 calls in a day. If I were to have just no time for doing any of the prep or the follow-up, I would just have this massive to-do list at the end that I just have to work through. And when you have 6 or 7 different calls that you're trying to recall, okay, what was I supposed to do here? What was I supposed to do, and so forth. Things can slip through the cracks. I'm not perfect.
easily. Yeah.
And
Totally.
I think a lot of us are always kind of doing this juggling game, somewhere between there. Then you have your regular work internal emails and other stuff we got to do. So I think you have to, at least I believe that scheduling in that bit of productivity will help you be more productive in terms of the work you need to do. And I even put in like work blocks in my calendar where I'm like, okay, no calls for an hour or 2 hours,
Mhm.
so I can actually focus and do work because there's always stuff doing. And that's where your schedule slides. You do calls all day, and then you have all this follow up, and that's another couple hours perhaps, and then
Oh
that
yeah,
eats
it
into
can.
your personal time. So part of your job is doing the job. So outside of these calls that we're all doing, schedule in that time, for doing your work so that you can make sure that you have that balance between work and life and it's not eating into your personal time.
That's great. Yeah. So like you just put all notifications off for like an hour, you block that in, you put it in your calendar, okay, this hour, come hell or high water, I have got to get this stuff done. And I also really like you said, I take notes and then you must have those digital on your calendar as well, I would assume, or some sort of a format so that you can recall what you guys talked about. And I think that's something that I don't do as well as I should is like take the time, take the 5 minutes afterwards, write down what happened. If it wasn't I'm a big pen and paper person, but put it in a digital format so that it doesn't disappear and you can get back to it. That's really smart. That's really smart. It seems
I
so
used to do
obvious.
pen and I used to do pen and
Right.
paper too. You know, like if I was in meetings, I would usually do pen and paper because I don't think it was very polite for us having conversation, you know, and
And you're
sitting in the
on.
same room, and I'm like, you know, kind of typing. But since I'm doing calls, I can take notes digitally because I would always have to transform that from, you know, written into digital anyways. But now with this, you know, I've developed, I think, a pretty decent shorthand for my style that I like, that works for me. And yeah, I always will refer back to my notes because it could be like months before I talk to somebody, and I have to see where we left off and pick it back up again.
Man, well, so we're coming up on the top of the hour, which is mind blowing because I feel like it has taken no time to talk together. I want to just double check in with our audience and see if you guys have any questions. You are more than welcome to raise your hand or put them in the chat. If there's anything specific you guys want to know on working remote, any tips you might have for converting it to your own office, if you have any questions about the, actual day to day of driving around the country and working remote, anything like that, feel free, like I said, either raise your hand, you could come off mute and ask it or put it in the chat. Uh, nope, let's see. Jen says, no question, but I was homeschooled for 10 years when it was super taboo. I can't imagine tiny mobile home living as well. This has been a very fascinating to me. Thanks for sharing, AC. Good to see you again. And thanks for the tips. Thank you, Jen. That was very nice of you to say. I appreciate that. I agree. Oh, Jeremy's got a question. Jeremy, do you want to come off mute and ask our question? Go ahead.
Absolutely. I know a couple questions I really have to do with the pandemic. I don't know how that works with your location in Texas. I know they're like a no mask mandate now, and so everything seems to be open. How does that affect you and your family? Do you interact with other families, or you're just self-isolated?
No, we've been interacting with other families. Since we've been on the road, we actually have been a part of a community that's called Full Time Families, which is a bunch of other families just like us that are on the road full time, whether it's for, you know, a short period of time that are just doing it for say months or less than a year or even longer term. But in our community, we connect, I would say, pretty frequently, not only just in terms of being able to connect physically so the kids can play and hang out, but also just to exchange information, you know, like, you know, where to go, where to stay, travel patterns. You know, if you're having problems with your rig, you know, troubleshooting, it's pretty fun community. But we are pretty deliberate actually, and mostly trying to, you know, connect and hang out with people. And most folks in our community are kind of like that as well. I would say that, you know, as far as the Texas question, the mask mandate in Texas was removed. It tends to vary by county and according into city as well. I would say that I've noticed it a little bit more so, you know, in the bigger cities where it's a little more densely populated, you know, so for the most part for us, we usually just don't go to the bigger cities because we, you know, we're usually mostly outdoors anyway, so there's not a lot of places to be outdoors in cities unless you want to do things like indoor activities, you know, like museums or something like that. But we've been perfectly happy doing what we're doing, you know, and taking advantage of the outdoors, you know, being here in South Padre Island. The beach is literally like, you know, a walk across the street, so we've been building sandcastles and boogie boarding, surfing, hiking. I mean, there's right now still, you know, at least a dozen other families that came to meet here on purpose, and we're all right near each other. So the kids go and they just play all day, just like when we were kids. I mean, just go out and play all day, and I kind of feel that's the way a kid's life should be. So we try to make sure we connect to have that kind of environment for our kids. And you know, when all this stuff gets figured out, then you know, then we might make some different decisions. But we just we like the connection. The kids like to play, and that's what we try to support.
Love it. Love it. You're right. I mean, especially with an RV, big cities don't really have campgrounds. So you got to go where you can park it and hook it up. That's kind of key. Lana asked a question. She said, AC, how do you avoid the faux pas of not showing your pajama bottoms when it's not appropriate?
Good question. I would say make sure you change out of your pajama bottoms, number one.
Boom.
So it's kind of funny because actually that happened to me one time. I totally, uh, most of the time since I'm only dialing in, I I'm usually just wearing like a t-shirt, and I'm usually like, you know, in my boxes. I'm just doing calls pretty much all day. At some point, you know, I was like, I'm going to go outside and I'll put my shorts on or something. But when I know I'm definitely doing a video call, I'm like, okay, I definitely need to, you know, so, you know, I have, you know, my cargo shorts on,
Perfect.
you know. But yeah, it's being mindful. And it only happened once. And the funny story about it was that I had a T-shirt on, and I was doing a video call on someone else's platform, and as I was trying to log off, I actually turned the video on. And I was like, oh, and I saw myself, and I turned the video off again. So yeah, that was a major faux pas. It was brief. I think the client kind of caught it. They chuckled a little bit, but it was just after that, I was like, okay, just make sure I'm wearing shorts and least, so not seeing my Fred Flintstone boxers or something like that.
Do you think that's something that you kind of like, almost like a warning label, like, hey, I work remote. Do you feel like you have to tell that to everybody when you talk to them? Does that come up, or do you think that it's not necessary? Like, how do you?
Not really. I actually think it's kind of fun. A lot of times when I'm meeting new clients, we usually kind of do this really short intro to talk about each other. It's usually more around the work experience, so we can understand each other from a professional standpoint. But I always will throw in a little bit at the end and say, well, my kind of claim to fame in my company is I'm kind of like the Where's Waldo of our company. No one really knows where I'm at. And they're like, what do you mean by that? I say, oh, well, 4 years ago, we downsized out of our house into a 34-foot Airstream. We travel, the country in a travel trailer, and it's about a 5 to 10 second delay for them to process it, and then they're like, "Whoa!"
Huh?
They're like, "That's so cool," And
Right.
so it's become a little bit of an interesting branding identity for myself. I think as a person to work with, because a lot of times, people are like, "Oh yeah, you're that guy that travels around." Even before the conferences kind of got put on hold, I did a couple interesting talks, and that was always kind of an interesting bit to fold into, because it's something unique and different that a lot of people just don't do.
Right. Yeah, that's super cool. Jeremy has one more question. I think then we gotta wrap it up. He said, "How far in advance do you the wrap?" Oh yeah, How far in advance do you plan to go to the next location? I know you mentioned, usually try to stay at least a month somewhere, which makes sense. I don't think I'd want to just constantly be literally driving. So, how far in
We
advance are you planning?
I comfortably like to look out about 90 days in advance, so about 3 months roughly. Now, before I was talking something about trying to plan for big experiences, so when we know where our big experiences are, it leaves a lot of wiggle room in between to figure out the logistics of how we want to get there, So South Padre Island kind of came on our radar late, but when it did, we're like, okay, we're definitely doing it. We came here. We're staying here for a month. We're here for another 2 weeks before we move on to our next location. And let me see, Michigan is on our list, so we're going to be heading there for the summer.
Oh yeah.
And then towards the end here, we're not quite sure, depending on how New Mexico is going to progress, but last year we were supposed to go to the Balloon Fiesta Festival. That got canceled, so our reservation rolled over to this year. So depending on how that plays out, we may do that. But with our full-time families travel group, they're actually planning to do a trip down to Baja, Mexico, which is on the west side, and in mid-January for 2 weeks. So I think that's going on the docket for sure for 2022.
That's so cool. I feel like we could talk forever. I feel like I still have more questions. But maybe this is something we just need to, I told you you should have a little show on it. I'm just saying. A little topic, little podcast. If you guys think AC should have a podcast talking all about this or some sort of channel, go ahead and tell him, because I'm trying to convince him that he does, and I don't think I'm the only one that should be doing it. Let's see. We've got a thank you for some valuable information. You are very welcome. Oh, I'm gonna butcher your name. I'm just gonna tell you in advance. Alstina? Maybe? I don't know. I'm not good at pronunciation, and I'm dyslexic, so it's not a good combination. But thank you for your message. We appreciate the kind words. We are gonna wrap up here. It is 12:59. We do want to value your time. AC, any final things that you want to throw at the people, or the final thing that I know about and
Should
they
get
don't?
Anna Cool to do the raffle real
Oh,
quick.
Anna, cool.
Hello,
Come
hello. I'm back.
back.
Sorry for my little internet blip at the last minute there. For
No,
those who are
you're
still on the
okay.
call, for all of you who are still on the call, please stay on. We have a raffle generously donated by your presenter for today, AC. So thank you, AC. And let me share
You
my
do have to be
screen.
present to win. There's only 9 of them. So I say they have to be present to win. So if the name is not somebody who's currently here, Oh, well,
Yeah, I think we got butt up right against the hour here. So
we are, but we appreciate you guys staying on. All right, Cool. Oh, this is fun.
Yeah, it's a little different
Hello.
than the ones we've been using before.
I
So
like this one. If anybody was curious of my opinion on this, I think it's fun.
Camille, are you on?
Woo! Neil, are you still with us? Neil Mary, you've been selected to come on down.
So what we'll do is I'll follow up, and the prizes are I'm donating 3 Starbucks gift cards valued at $10 each. So I can just email you those digitally. So thanks for coming, and I believe through your registration I have your email, so I'll make sure to get that to you right after the meeting here.
We should, but Camille, if you just want to pop your email, the best email for you in the chat, that'd be cool too. That way we can make sure we get the right one. I know I use like my overwhelming email to do these things, so.
All right.
There's a more
More
direct one
Nicole.
you can use.
All right, one more time.
Spin it to win it. I like the sound effects personally. I'm all about the sound effects. Ding, 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 ding.
David Lawhorn.
I know that guy. I don't know if he's still on though. Oh, Dave, where you at? He's disappeared. What do you think? Wonderful, you're the one running it.
I'm deferring to AC. I live with AC's choice here.
Yeah, that's fine. They were here. I know some people had to drop off because they had a call right at the top of the hour. So
I know Lana, and I think it was just Lana and David anyways. All right, go again.
All
One
right.
more. Third roll.
Because David was here throughout the meeting as well. I did see his name.
He was. That was the concern. Were you actually here the whole time?
Emily Palmer.
Come on down. You're the next contestant who's actually already won a prize. So I guess you're not a contestant. Emily, what's happening? I like your bananas.
Thank you. Just trying to keep things exciting.
Well, you're in the right place. We like to do things that are exciting.
Well, thank you for the coffee and for the really great webinar today. I really enjoyed it.
Yay. Thank you for coming. We appreciate you guys. Yeah, just if you want to drop your best email in the chat for him real quick, Emily. Otherwise, thank you everybody for showing up. If you have any other questions or think of something, I know AC is on social medias. What's the best way for them to get in touch with you if they did think of something later on they might want to ask? Or to follow your adventures?
I would say the probably easiest way is we're pretty good about posting on Instagram. So if you recall, my youngest girl nicknamed our trailer Shiny Tiny. So if you look for Shiny Tiny Times, all one word, you'll find us.
Shiny Tiny Times on Instagram. I'm totally gonna come follow you guys. I want to see what's going on. Live vicariously through you all, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. We are so happy you came. Again, find at Shiny Tiny Times. That is a tongue twister, but it's memorable. I just can't say it well. And follow them on Instagram so you can see where on earth they go next. I know they're really good at building sandcastles as well, like really good at building sandcastles at this point. So you definitely want to check that out. If nothing else, I know there's more photos of the trailer and the family and all the fun things that they're doing. Thank you guys for showing up. AC, thank you so much for sharing all your wealth of information. And we will see you guys around at our next, look for more events. And if you are part of District 44, we also have our conference coming up. Early bird tickets, I believe there's still some available for like $20, all inclusive, and swag bags are included, which is super cool and super exciting. Thank you guys. Have a wonderful day. We will see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh yeah, you can come off mute if you want and say thanks. That's cool. We don't mind. Cool. We can stop recording too. Bye, Victoria. Thank you for coming.